So social actionists have been successful in explaining behaviour in society in that they look at individual experiences. So rather than we've been looking at structural theories, we're looking at bottom-up individualist theories where we think about how people make their own decisions based on their own experiences and interactions with people. So we've looked at symbolic interactionism, the idea that the colour red, for instance, might represent anger, love, hate, a stop sign, and other things too. But we interpret it in different ways based on how we feel and our experiences of those different things. So you need to know today labelling theory and dramaturgy. We need to think about different examples and we need to evaluate them too as part of what we know in interactionist behaviour or social action theory, also known as interpretivism. So social actionists explain human behaviour in a bottom-up theory, the idea that individuals influence society. The two states of self according to Mead were the me and the I, the internal and the internal self based on how we think we should do things and our own values, and our external, the way that we act because we know that others will make judgments of us. Social action theory is bottom up because it's about how we influence society as individuals, and that's what that means. Symbolic interactionism is us learning norms and values through primary and secondary socialisation, understanding what things mean and how to use them. How people learn symbols is through primary and secondary socialisation. So we finished off by looking at Bloomer last lesson. It's the idea that action is based on meaning. Everyone has their own meaning and understanding of situations and therefore act accordingly. We need a stimulus to respond, so something needs to happen or something needs to have happened for us to respond in the way that we see appropriate. Meaning isn't fixed, meaning is actually fluid, which means it changes spatially and temporally. Meaning is based on the superstructure is incorrect. That would be something that Marxists would believe. People make their own choices, absolutely. They believe, Bloomer, as an interactionist, believes that we are free to make our own decisions. Behaviour can be predictable if it's been repeated, but sometimes people choose to deviate from what is seen to be the norms of that behaviour. And meaning is internalised. This means that from our experiences we take these experiences and learn from them, and they become embedded in how we see and how we act in the world. And behaviour can be negotiated, so when we start to look at things like ethnomethodology, it's understood that behaviour is managed between people and according to the situation and the experiences that they've had in the past. So labelling, the idea that we have free will and choice, we label things as positive or negative according to our situation and how we perceive things. In terms of a situation, we believe something to be true, we act in a certain way, which can be subconsciously. So for instance, when we link this synoptically to education, we might label a deviant boy a cheating husband, and we might respond to these in a particular way, particularly if we are seeing this from a feminist perspective. We had Cooley, who talks of the looking glass self, the idea that we manage our impressions based on how we think others see and perceive us. And then we have Becker and Lamert, who talk about the idea that people share group values and behaviours, but Becker talks of careers. So again, a synoptic link to Crime and Deviance, where Cicero was talking about how people act according to their labels. We've got Becker, who says that we share a career. So in Crime and Deviance, this is a deviant career. In other areas, so for health, an ill person follows a patient career, so acting as a patient should. You can link this to a functionalist view in a similarity where Parsons talks about the patient role, where you have to seek help so that you can get better as soon as you can to fulfil your role, and in the meantime you have to get someone else to do it for you. So a mother who's ill can't just let their kids fend for themselves. They would need to find someone else to look after them, and they would need to get themselves better as soon as possible. And similar to this idea of labelling, where we have this illness or ill career or patient role, then we perform in a particular way according to how we know we should look after our bodies and ourselves and try and get ourselves better as soon as possible. We link this to dramaturgy, so one of this famous quote from the play As You Like It by Shakespeare, the idea that you are acting in a particular role, and you will adapt and change according to your audience and according to the cast that are around you and the situation that you're in. So Goffmand, as you're aware, is a dramaturgical theory, how we present ourselves in everyday life. That's the name of his idea. There are different contexts in which we're performing, on stage, off stage, in the wings, where you could be seen but you might not be. You might use props and informal scripts, so things that we know we should say, but we adapt them according to improvisation of different situations. We perform and we have different roles in society that we play. On stage, we know we're being watched and we act accordingly. Off stage, we know we're not being watched, so this might be in a bedroom or in your own home, where you behave according to how you decide to behave. So if we're performing something like seeing a friend you arranged to meet outside a coffee shop, we generally arrange to meet them at a certain time. They might be there before us. We walk along the road, we might see them. We don't wave crazily along the road until we actually meet them. We often look up and maybe distract ourselves by looking at our phone or in shop windows, and wait till we're a bit closer to them before we say hi and maybe greet them with a kiss on the cheek if there's someone you're close to, or perhaps a handshake if you're not so close to them. But certainly it's almost like an act of surprise when you see that they're there already. Catching a bus again, you will line up in a queue, follow what everybody else is doing, get on the bus, swipe your Oyster card, and so on and so forth. And if you run for the bus and you catch it if it's just ahead of you, then you're more likely to run for the bus again. However, if you run for the bus and then they drive off without you, it feels embarrassing, and so you won't perform that same act again. We don't run around naked because we don't want people to think that we're deviant or certainly criminal in some places. We don't jump up and down screaming in the middle of lessons because, again, we're thinking about our impression management. If we decide to do that, it's because we want attention in some way and we're acting in a deviant role. However, most of you will sit and write and make notes because you know that the role you're performing is that of student, and people are observing you and you're managing your impression. So a key term that you must know is the idea of impression management, so linked to Cooley's idea of the looking glass self, how people respond to action from the audience or their reaction. So we learn these scripted roles through socialisation, so they're hello, how are you, I'm fine, thank you, how are you? We know that we should follow those roles, and sometimes we deviate from them and we find that a bit strange. So if someone says to you, hi, how are you? They don't expect you to say, well, I'm financially unstable, I don't like my job, I've got a really bloated stomach, and all those kind of things that we kind of keep to ourselves unless it's someone that we're really close to. So the scripted roles don't necessarily get deviated from, and when they do, people think you're pretty odd. And there's also a gap between your true self and the role that's allocated. So when you're managing your impression, you're not actually, it's kind of incongruous with what you're actually believing. We're not actually showing how we truly think or feel. We're acting how we think the other person wants to see us act. So we watched a clip about the real hustle, how the hustler dresses and acts like a real person. So in this particular clip, we looked at a person who was trying to run as an estate agent, and they try to rent out someone else's house that they actually don't own. But we see them as trustworthy. They have a suit, they say things that are believable, they make us believe that what the situation is true, and certainly our own experiences of people being true make us believe that actually that person is acting in a trustworthy way. Problems with Goffmand's theory. We can definitely see that society is shaped by choice and meaning, so as a positive criticism. However, as a small-scale theory, it does ignore institutions. So we talk about individual interaction, but it fails to consider the role of the other institutions or agencies in shaping people's actions. It also overlooks patterns of inconsistency, where we've got these scripted roles and informal scripted roles. Some people don't follow them, and there's no explanation for why. It also fails to explain unconscious action. It talks about decisions being made unconsciously, but it doesn't explain how and why that occurs. It fails to explain how meaning is created. So where people create their own meaning on situations, it doesn't actually give you an outline on how that is so. So that's Goffmand's theory of society and an interactionist perspective.